Hey guys, Waterfowler41 here, and we are kicking off a really exciting two-part series. So, the ultimate goal here over the next couple videos is to install that bumper right there. That is the ADD Race Series bumper. I picked it up from Apollo Off-Road. That bumper looks amazing. Got some Diode Dynamics lights that I'm gonna install on it. It's gonna be awesome. However, a prerequisite before I install that bumper is we need to do something about our intercooler. Not because my intercooler doesn't perform very well. So if you remember, I have the CVF intercooler right down there. What we need to do is swap that out with a high mount intercooler. And the reason being is this bumper only works with the factory intercooler or it works with a high mount intercooler. Since I'm running a tune, I want to run a larger aftermarket intercooler, so high mount it is. So this is from CVF. This is their Titan high mount intercooler. And essentially what that's going to do is it's going to replace the CVF Titan 2 that we have down low. And it's going to move that intercooler right up here behind the grill. So there's a lot of work needed in order to fit that big boy behind the grill, but it's going to be a lot of fun work. But like I said, this is a prerequisite project for the bumper. The bumper is going to be in part 2. Part 1 is this. Let's talk about the plan here. Here's how I'm going to tackle this one. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the grill. We got to do this regardless, but I'm going to do it earlier on because when you remove the intercooler down there, it's a lot easier when you have a ton of light in there. And when you pull this grill off, it really does open up a lot of room. So you can kind of manipulate things from up above as well as below. If you are interested in how to replace the factory intercooler with the CVF Titan 2, I have a video and I'll drop that down in the link. This video, all I'm going to be doing is swapping out this intercooler down here with the high mount one. In the kit, we get our high mount intercooler. We get all the couplings, we get a new bracket so we can mount this guy up across the front cross member there. Get some new plumbing to accommodate where the new intercooler is going to be at. The upper bracket, and then a boatload of hose clamps. So, give me a lot of work. It's gonna be fun. It's beautiful weather outside, so let's dive into it. So the first thing we're gonna do is pull off that grill. All right, so as far as getting the grill off, here's how the process works. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna hop inside here, inside the wheel well. We're gonna undo these two 7mm screws, and then we're gonna take the fender flare and pull it straight out from the vehicle. Once we do that, what that will allow us to do, we're gonna have to do on both sides, then we could pop off this little fascia thing underneath the grill. We need to undo this, that way we can pull the grill off. Then we're gonna hop up here, we're gonna pull off our upper shroud. I have the Cobb shroud. Even if you have the factory shroud, it's just a bunch of push pins. Once we pull this off, you're gonna see 4 10mm bolts across the top. We're gonna undo that. Then at that point, the grill itself, actually I believe there's 2 more screws on here. The grill itself will be able to pop straight. All right, so just to kind of catch you up on where I'm at, I went ahead, removed the upper shroud, and then I pulled out the fender flares. You don't need to fully remove them, just enough that you can get your hand behind the corner here, because now what we're gonna do is basically just pull this guy, and it's all clips all along the way here. Got my little helper down there. And you gotta do it on both sides. So you basically just pull this guy, let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna do it with 2 hands so I don't ruin anything. But that's all you gotta do, is just pull it. It sounds like hell, but it does pop off. So once I get that off, that's gonna give me access to 2 bolts right here. Once I get those 2 bolts off, then at that point, we should be able to pull the grill off because I went ahead and undid those 4 bolts up top. All right, so before you can fully remove the grill from the truck, you need to undo some wiring harnesses as well as the windshield washer fluid for your front camera. So you're gonna unplug the shutters, gonna unplug the camera here, we're gonna unplug our marker lights, and then we're gonna unplug the windshield washer fluid here. So all these things will stay with the vehicle. I forget how this one, there you go. That's how that one unplugs. And then there's some push clips here. We'll just pry those up. That way we can get the grill. There we go. And we'll just tuck these guys like so. All right, so we got that little fascia piece off here. So now the next thing you're gonna do is locate the innermost bolt on each side. This needs to come off, and then at that point, the grill can pop straight off. You will not have these unless you have the KR off-road brackets. I'm gonna remove these. I don't need these anymore. I did have these on the truck to mount my SS5 light bar, but since we're changing up the lighting package, we no longer need those. So anyway, let's get that bolt off, get the bolt off here, and then at that point, we should be able to grab the grill, and it's just clips holding it in, and just gonna give it a good pop, and it'll come off. Okay, so the grill is off. Now you can see why I took it off, because I can get access to the top of my intercooler here, also the top bracket, and again, like I said, this is where everything goes, so it's nice to just get everything off earlier. But you can see how I get a lot more access and light and everything in there. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and pull off the CVF intercooler I have down there, which is as simple as undoing the pipes on this side, undoing the pipes on this side, after I get the skid plate off, and then just popping this guy out. But we'll get up underneath and I'll show you what you need to undo. All right, so before you can get access to getting your intercooler out, you got to remove the skid plate. I have aftermarket skid plates, but this process is the same even if you have factory ones. So got to remove this guy. Once I remove that, I'll be able to get to the bottom bolts for the bottom intercooler bracket here, and then we'll be able to pop this guy out along with the fans and everything on the back end of it. This will also give us access to the hose couplers on each side of the intercooler, so we could detach those, get everything disconnected. All right, so we got our skid plate off. So now we could take a look at things. So on one side of your intercooler, you're gonna have 2 blue rubber couplers. We're gonna need to undo these. Then we're gonna need to undo this bracket that goes all the way across. This is what holds the bottom of the intercooler. Don't do this until after you get all the other connections undone. I'm just showing you because that's where I'm at right now. Now we have our fan plug here. So this plugs into the fans on the back of the intercooler here. With the new intercooler, we will not need these anymore. So essentially what we're gonna do is unplug these. I'm gonna wrap this up in a Ziploc bag and tape it up, zip tie it up out of the way. We're good to go there. So the fan and the intercooler are gonna come out. On this side, we have a larger rubber coupler as well as our blow-off valve or our bypass valve, and then a top coupling up here. So super simple here. We're just gonna basically undo all these pipe clamps and then undo our plug here. Undo this, and then that intercooler is basically gonna drop out. This is a heavy guy. Even the factory one's pretty cumbersome, so be careful. The fans are gonna wanna fall out too. So just be careful, but that's what you gotta undo. So let's get everything out of here, and then we could start focusing on installing our new intercooler. All right, so we got our fans unplugged. Make sure you pull off the tree clip because the fan housing is gonna come out, and the harness that's attached to the vehicle is also pushed into the fan housing. I went ahead and undid the recirc pipe here. So this is what connects to your quote-unquote blow-off valve and goes back into your air intake. It's just spinning this little silver guy or this little gray guy and then pulling the hose straight off there. Then the last thing I need to do is unplug the recirc valve up there, the electrical connection. That connection stays with the vehicle. At that point, I have everything off. So I got the elbow off on this side. I got the clamps off on this side. So then everything should just basically fall right out once I get this bracket out. So be careful. Sometimes on these things, it's really nice to have a second set of hands here to help you kind of lower this thing out controllably, but it's just me. So we're gonna pull this, let it fall on me, get it out of the way, and then we can start installing your new high mount intercooler. All right, so here is the intercooler out of the truck here. You can see, pretty much covered in road salt. Didn't clean the truck before I started working on it, but that's fine. So it's out. We got our recirc valve here. We're gonna relocate this guy to one of the new pipes on the high mount intercooler here. You can see I left the blue hose clamps on there for now. It was just easier to get them out that way. This bottom bracket, we're good. We remove that. And then with the intercooler came the fan housing. So what I'm gonna do now is pull this apart. Let's go grab the factory intercooler and take a look at all 3 intercoolers side by side so you can see the difference. And then from there, we'll get right back into the installation. All right, as promised, we're gonna take a look at the 3 intercoolers that I have. So I'm acquiring quite a collection here. So anyway, we got our factory intercooler here. Drawbacks here is it's small, lack of flow here, and plastic end tanks. It's really a small surface area, and heat exchanging, which is what these are, they're just basically heat exchangers, is a function of surface area, and you can see how much smaller that guy is compared to the CVF Titan 2. So this is Titan 2, this goes in the factory location. It's basically a 1-for-1 swap with the factory one, but you can see you get much more surface area here, and it's a plate and frame, so you get much more heat exchange efficiency. Now, our new intercooler, this is the high mount one. So what it lacks in thickness compared to the Titan V2, it makes up for in height. So it is better than the factory one. I think as far as performance between these two, it's probably gonna be about the same, maybe a little bit better with this guy, just simply because it's gonna be mounted up higher. Couple things here. You notice that I already got the rubber stoppers here. Those pull off of the intercooler here and they pull off to the factory one if that's what you're swapping out. The other thing I did is I pulled off the recirc valve and I relocated that guy onto our pipe here. It's super simple. It is a clock pipe, so it really can go in one way, and then there's hardware in the CVF kit, so you can attach it right to that little peg there. So this guy is good to go. We'll lay him off to the side. We already have our pipes ready to go. We figured out what gasket or what couplers go where. This is a new charge pipe, so ultimately we're gonna be replacing the pipe on our throttle body. We'll get to that guy a little bit later in the installation. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna install the intercooler into the truck, which requires us to install the bracket down here and then replace that silver bracket there with the one that comes in the CV Fab kit. Now, a couple important things here. When you are removing this one, before you remove the hood latch here, you need to draw a line or put some tape in there so you know where this was installed. This is how you adjust the depth of your hood latch, and you want to make sure that when you pull it off, put the CVF bracket on there, and then bolt everything down, it goes right back to where it was from the factory. That way you don't have any hood alignment issues. Okay, so a couple notes on this bottom bracket here. First of all, it's 13mm bolt to get this guy out, but what you'll notice is it's attached to these little tiny struts that are attached to the bumper, these little bumper braces. It does not look like these are used once you install the new CVF bracket because there's no extension piece or anything like that, and I don't see anything obvious there. So that's not a huge issue. I don't think it really does anything sort of structural there, and since I'm going to be going to an aftermarket bumper anyway, don't really need those because I won't be running them with the aftermarket one. But anyway, got that unbolted from that side, unbolted from there. Now I just got to shimmy this guy out of the way. All right, so once that's out of the way, then we find our CVF bracket, and this guy just goes right where that one was. And then what this is gonna do is give us our lower mounting point for the intercooler. We're gonna pop the intercooler on there after unbolting this, pop it up into place, and then the intercooler will be installed. From there, we could then focus on trimming our grill. We're gonna have to do a lot of modifications to that, but let's get the intercooler fully installed here, and then we'll talk through trimming in the next step. Okay, so we got our bottom brace in there. I just have the intercooler just resting up there right now. Next part we need to do is find the top bracket. When you install the top of the intercooler, basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna pop this bracket on, and then after removing the bolt around the hood latch, that's when you're just gonna slide this guy into place, bolt everything down. So you cannot do this after the fact. You can't install this and then expect to install the intercooler. It's gotta go on all at one time. So what I'm gonna do now is take a permanent marker and just trace this edge here on both sides and maybe draw a few lines, index lines up on the top. That way when I go to reinstall the hood latch, everything's in the right place and everything's nice and aligned or as close to it as possible. So we got the intercooler fully installed. So a couple things that made it really helpful here. One, take note of the orientation of this bracket. It goes behind the cable and then on top of the bracket here. I could see somebody trying to screw this thing in on top and then pushing and breaking this cable. It goes behind it. It takes a little bit, but it does work. The other thing I would suggest is throw WD-40 on these rubber gaskets here, or these rubber spacers, and then push the brackets down because when they are dry, it is really hard to get them to seat fully into the brackets here. And it makes putting and installing this thing a lot easier. So you can see I drew a bunch of little reference lines, everything lined up perfectly. We are good to go. So we are good from the intercooler standpoint. So what I'm gonna do now is start looking at the grill, and then we're gonna start figuring out where we need to cut. So let's get the grill up on the table here, and then we can start going over what we need to cut, what we need to remove, and what we need to plug back in and zip tie up out of the way. So, all right, so we're looking at the back of our grill. So here is a download on what modifications we need to make to this. First, we need to pull out all of these grill shutters. Then, the easiest way to do that is prying on the outside and then pulling the shutters up. They're super flexible. They should pop straight out. Then what we're going to do is we're going to unbolt the shutter motor here. We're going to need to plug this guy back in. That guy plugs into one of the plugs right here. If you do not plug that back in, you're going to get an engine code. So we're going to plug it in. I know on the 2024 and newer, you also need to get a little bracket to make sure that there's load on the motor, or you're going to get a check engine light. But in the 2023 case like mine, just plugging this guy back in and zip tying it out of the way should be plenty. Okay. So then we're going to remove that guy, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start taking the grill, we're going to lay it up kind of in place here, figuring out how wide we need to cut and then how high we need to cut to clear that intercooler here. So as far as width, it's going to be somewhere between here, and then height, we're probably going to have to trim right through here all the way to the front just to clear out and get the center support out of the way. So the center support is going to be gone by the time we're done with trimming. I just don't know how wide we need to cut the bottom here. The other thing I'm going to do before we start cutting is I'm going to pull off this random piece here. This is what gets caught on this little rubber piece here. I'm not really sure what the intent is, but since we're going to be cutting the bottom grill, there's no structural, I guess, reasoning for this. Maybe it's there to move water out of the way, or give water a channel to go the other way. But I'm gonna pull that off for now, and then if I find out after we cut it, I could put it back on and trim it just a little bit, then we'll go ahead and do that just so everything's close to factory. All right, so I went ahead and pried all the shutters out of there. I also removed that little bottom piece here, as well as the shutter motor. So just so I don't forget that in the future, I went ahead and just laid it up here on top of the coolant reservoir tank. Ultimately, that's gonna plug in here, and what we're gonna most likely do is probably just zip tie it here or here out of the way. That way it stays plugged in, it still sends the feedback signal to the computer, and we're not gonna throw any sort of check engine light issues. Anyway, back to this. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick the grill up, and I'm basically just gonna slide it up against the intercooler here, try to center things as much as possible, draw lines on each side where I need to cut on the bottom, and then on the top do the same thing, and then just start playing with the cuts. I'd rather have to cut more in multiple steps versus trying to cut too much all at once and trying to do it all at once in one shot. It's not gonna work. So all right, so all the cuts are done. This probably took me the longest than any other step in this process, mostly because I was cutting a little bit at a time just to make sure I was only cutting the bare minimum. So instead of giving you measurements, I'm just gonna give you a really good overview. So you could screenshot this. Here, I'll zoom back. You could take a screen capture so you can reference it on yours. This is the one thing that I feel like any high mount intercooler instruction misses out on, is they don't really give you super clear instructions on Gen 3s. So as far as cuts, there's a big cut all along the bottom here. So basically I made it, I think it's about 3/4 of an inch from this one, and then I just drew a straight line across. Ultimately, you wanna make sure this cut is wide enough and deep enough to clear the front mount intercooler once you go to push the grill on. Then the other cut I made was up top here. So I cut this in a few spots. Cut it on the sides to make sure it's clear cut there, and then I flush cut it across the top. And you wanna make sure that it's cut enough that it clears the top of the intercooler, but also when you go to put it on the truck, that it also clears this bracket. That's why you see these little notches right here. That's to clear the bracket, and then the bottom portion is to clear the top of the intercooler. So anyway, we have everything fitting good from a grill perspective. I'm gonna leave the grill off because it's actually gonna be easier to route the pipes without the grill installed. And then what we're gonna do is turn our attention to the rest of the pipes. So the first thing we're gonna do is find our Y pipe. So this little Y pipe here is what connects on this side of the intercooler, so the passenger side of the intercooler. There's gonna be a 45-degree coupler. It's gonna pop into here, and then these two are gonna attach to our pipes right down there. So super simple, let's just connect everything. I'll give you an overview of that one, and then we'll turn our attention to the slightly more complicated side, which is the driver's side. Driver's side is two pieces. You got this little piece with our recirc valve, and then you got a new charge pipe going into the intake, and that means we're gonna need to swap out the one on our truck. But, all right, so I have the passenger side pipes installed. Let's hop up underneath and take a look at them. There they are, super simple. One thing I would suggest is putting a little bit of WD-40 on each inside of each of the couplers as well as the outside, because these clamps are really tight. Once you get them on, you wanna be able to rotate them a little bit. So on the top one, that's the one I did first. I basically took this coupler and I put it as far up on the pipe as possible to get it out of the way. I attached the top one, buckled everything down, and then I went to this one. What you'll notice is on the clamps, I don't have those springs anymore. Unfortunately, these are so tight that the springs I couldn't get them on. So I took them off. I still have plenty of thread here. It's a nice tight fitting. I don't have any concerns about that one. Then you have a 45-degree coupler that goes into the bottom of the intercooler there. So I have one clamp that I tighten from the top and one clamp I tighten from the bottom. Again, this is the reason why I left the grill off. It was a lot easier to install this guy with that grill off. I was just able to tighten everything up from front of the truck. So now what we need to do is turn our attention to this side. So we have the other side. This is the driver's side of the intercooler. It's gonna connect to a 45 coupler, and then it's gonna route into the pipe with the blow-off valve, route into our charge pipe, and then go up into the throttle body. Now, what I need to do though is take off the old charge pipe on my truck, because we need to replace that with the new one that's going to accommodate the new routing of the piping and everything. So let's go up in the engine bay. I'll show you how to remove this guy. There's really not much to it. It's just a coupler holding it onto the throttle body, one sensor as well as one little pressure line, and then this guy comes out, and we're going to remove it from, I believe the easiest way to do that might be from the top or bottom, I don't know. All right, so the charge pipe is right there, and you can see I already have a CVF charge pipe on there, but that was for the factory location. What I'm gonna need to do is I'm probably gonna pull off this inlet pipe here just so I get some room for the pipe, and then you need to reach down, and there's a pressure clip right there. You just push that white pressure clip. We're gonna unplug the temperature sensor up on top of that intake pipe, and then we should be able to push it. I think, if I remember correctly, it comes out to the bottom, and then we're gonna get our new pipe there, reattach the sensor to that guy, throw him in, and then reattach everything. But all right, so we got our old charge pipe out of the truck, and we're gonna install the new one. So what we need to do before we install this guy is transfer the sensor over to this guy. There's a little O-ring in the kit here, right here. I believe we're gonna use that one, so we'll lay that aside. But basically, I'm just gonna remove it off here, clean off this little area, clean off the sensor, pop it on here, and then we're good to go to install it. So you can see here, you got your little pressure little nipple here, matches that guy. So what we're gonna do ultimately, I believe, the easiest way is to just drop this guy down from above and then pop it right onto the throttle body. I'm gonna use this coupler on the throttle body. I believe this is the correct one for that. That's what I had on my original ones, and I like the bulge one at the throttle body because it gives it some flex. But I also had some pipe clamps on there that came from the factory that I'm going to use. I'm not going to use the ones that came in the CVF kit. I just like their standard pipe clamps on throttle bodies. All right, so our charge pipe is installed. So I just got these guys on there loosely. I think I'm gonna have to move that guy around quite a bit in order to attach the bottom piece here, but we're good up here for now. I'm gonna leave everything loose. And then the last piece we're gonna mess around with is this guy. So this has our recirc valve. If you have a Turbo Smart blow-off valve, this is where you would attach it right about there. But it's got a connection for the factory piece. We're good to go. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to reconnect that piece, the recirc hose that goes back to the intake, but that's okay because I do have a Boomba blow-off spacer, so basically it vents to atmosphere anyway. So I think what I'm gonna do is pull off the line on the bottom of the driver's side inlet pipe and cap it with, where did that cap go? There's a cap in the kit right here. So I'm gonna cap the other end of the hose that connects to the blow-off valve. I believe it connects into this pipe right here on the bottom side of it. And then I just throw a hose clamp on there. It's fine because everything does already vent to the atmosphere. So let's get underneath the truck and install this guy. I have a feeling, like I said, it's gonna fight us a little bit. So we're gonna put a bunch of WD-40 in the inside of the couplers so that we can move this guy around quite a bit. But let's hop underneath the truck, get this guy installed, take a look at the final routing on everything, and then throw the grill on, fire up the truck, and pray to God we don't have any check engine lights. All right, so we got our inlet pipe back on, which means we have our charge pipe installed. Don't forget to plug in the that little sensor on the side, as well as a little pressure nipple. That one's good. I tightened that one last because I did need to monkey around a little bit with the pipe underneath the truck. So let's get underneath there and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so here is our pipe. It's coming from our intercooler into that 45. We got our clamps on there. We got our recirc valve on here. And then this is the bottom of that charge pipe, goes up to the throttle body. So what I wanted to make sure that I was doing was clearing this pipe right here. I didn't want any sort of contact there. And I did that by basically lowering this portion of the pipe and then pushing it off to the side. So you can move the charge pipe side to side. So don't tighten that one until the very end. That way you get everything in the spot that you need to. So got all our pipe clamps installed, got our blow-off valve plugged back in. I may end up switching to a Turbo Smart blow-off valve just to kind of get all this junk out of the way. This is the plug for our fan. We do not need this anymore. So what I'm gonna do is wrap this up and then I'm just gonna zip tie it up out of the way right there. So it's not gonna dangle into the way of everything. We have our shutter motor from our lower shutter assembly, which I removed with my first intercooler. We're just gonna zip tie this one up behind the bumper again. And then let me hop up by the intercooler and I'll show you where I zip tied the upper shutter motor that we removed from the grill. All right, so here is the upper shutter motor that I just kind of zip tied to this little wire harness. Make sure that you test fit it, that it's out of the way of the grill. But we are good to go. So that one's plugged in. Make sure they're both plugged in. This guy's just gonna get zip tied right there. So he's out of the way. That will make sure that you're not gonna get any sort of check engine lights. So at this point, we are good to go to start reinstalling everything. So check for clearances, make sure you tighten all the clamps, make sure you plugged in your blow-off valve, you taped up your fan plug, you plugged in the sensor on the charge pipe, and that all the couplers are installed tight and everything's where it's at and it's not gonna contact anything. But at this point, I'm good to go to start closing up everything, put the grill on, let's fire up the truck, and it is late now, but I'll give you my final thoughts tomorrow on this project and then we'll shut this one down. All right, it is a new day and everything is working great. I did test drive the truck last night after I put all the pieces back together. Everything is hunky-dory. So the way I do things as far as engine modifications, I'll turn the truck on, I'll let it run in the driveway for a bit, won't drive it. I'll turn the truck off, wait a few minutes, turn it back on. When you turn it back on, if you are gonna get a check engine light, it's typically when it's gonna happen, when the engine kind of has an opportunity to cycle things. No check engine lights, we're all good. I wasn't expecting any check engine lights because we have our shutter motors, the one up here and the one down low installed. We're all good to go. Biggest thing I can say is take note of where I made the cuts on the grill because that will allow you to clear the intercooler perfectly without having any sort of contact issues between the grill and the intercooler. So all good to go. Install was super simple. Took me about 3 hours start to finish by myself. Now, two things. One, here is a look at all the parts that you remove from the truck. I feel like some of the videos of these intercooler installs, people don't really walk through what's left at the end of the install, but this is what you're left with. You have your upper and lower intercooler brackets, and then you got that little plastic sheeting thing that was on the bottom of the grill. I really saw no reason to reinstall that because we were already cutting the grill. So I removed that, just kept it off. We'll put it back when we sell the truck. Factory intercooler, as well as fans. The fan plug that is still on the truck. I just wrapped it in a Ziploc bag and then I zip tied it up out of the way. So that is what you remove. Also the recirc hose. So a couple comments on this. I was able to remove the recirc hose because I'm running a Boomba spacer. So basically I turned my factory recirc valve into a vent to atmosphere blow-off valve. If you are gonna reuse that hose, you will need to modify it for the new routing. So you might need to heat it up or get some new piping to do that. What I would suggest, instead of doing that, just go ahead and either get yourself an aftermarket blow-off valve or do something like a Boomba spacer. That way you don't need to reconnect that recirc hose. There's a plug that comes in the kit that will install on the driver's side of the inlet pipe. Just use that to plug the port on the inlet pipe, and then you could just vent your recirc valve to atmosphere. No harm, no foul. Last thing, in the kit, you also get this bracket. Now this is common to CVF. So basically when you buy these kits, they apply across several platforms, and typically what happens is they'll come with some brackets that might be for one vehicle, but might not necessarily apply to another vehicle. I got this and I was looking at it, I was like, what the heck is this? Contacted CVF, they said, don't worry, that's not for this particular application, that's for ones where there is a sensor in front of the intercooler and you gotta relocate it. So it's essentially a relocation bracket. So with that, you will end up with extra hardware, and in some cases you'll end up with extra brackets. Don't fret. If you didn't see them using this video for a Gen 3 and you're doing this on a Gen 3, this is how you install everything. And last but not least, let's finish off with a sneak peek of the bumper. So this is gonna be part 2. This is my ADD Race Series off-road bumper. Picked this up from Apollo Off-Road. So I'm pretty stoked about this one. It looks super cool. I've always wanted a tubular bumper. This is the best of both worlds because it's tubular, but it also allows you to run fog lights. So you can see I'm test fitting some options right now. I have Diode Dynamics SS10s in the corners here, but instead of just running a single SS10, what I am gonna do is do this. I'm gonna run the Diode Dynamics SS10, and then I cross-linked it to an SSC2 that I picked up when I was at the Ambassador event. So then we're gonna take this guy and cram it right in there, and it's gonna look awesome. But anyway, that's gonna be part 2. Part 1 was getting that intercooler relocated. We are good to go here. So now all we gotta do is pull off that bumper, throw the new bumper on there, wire up our lights, and we are good to go. But really, from a front end modification standpoint, the hard part's over by moving that intercooler. So it's all really downhill from here. Can't wait for the next front end Friday when this truck's gonna look a bit different. But with that said, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. I know this is a long video. I tried to cover a lot of detail. If you have questions, leave them down below. I know there's a lot of mystery about some of these high mount intercooler installs. Hopefully I covered it in enough detail, but if you have additional questions, drop them below. I will try to respond, or hit me up on Instagram. And I also do need to give a nice shout out to the Ford Raptor Nation folks. I am a moderator in that group. We're trying to build a group. I'll leave a link to that group down below. Join it. Be a part of the conversation. Be a part of the action. Be a part of history in the Raptor world. But that, y'all have a good one. Later.